have a full, we do have a full program tonight. And welcome everyone here. Had some introductory comments to make, but I think we're going to have some a good mix of presenters, and then we'll have time for questions and answers afterwards. Yes, I see pretty much everyone's here, so I just thought I'd start as it is 7 o'clock and just first welcome everyone here, and just explain there is an agenda tonight, and we do have a good program set up tonight. And again, I'm Gordon Ridgway, First Selectman. I'm also chair of the town's Affordable Housing Planning Committee, which is a committee, and you'll be hearing from several members tonight, including Anna Tamel from the Planning and Zoning, Maggie Cooley from the Cornwall Housing Corporation, Heather Deneen of Cornwall Social Services, and Marina Kachabi, Selectman. Also on the committee is Will Evans and Sana Peterson and Janet Carlson, and other people, and Jill Cutler. So other committee members are free to chime in during the comment session. But we try to do is get a mixture of people that have been involved with housing issues for a while in town, some different perspectives on things, and some new voices in town. So again, welcome everyone. And I'd also like to start by saying that having a diversified housing options has long been a priority for the town. And this current Board of Selectmen established as a goal to have a housing forum soon after we were elected back in November of 2019. And like many town officials in the past, we wonder, as the price of housing goes up, who's going to be able to live in town, to serve on our volunteer boards, to man our emergency services, to have kids in school, provide essential goods and services to people. And this is an old concern of the town that the town has been working on as a community for quite a while with some success. Since we scheduled this, of course, COVID happened, and so the housing forum that we thought we were going to have in 2020 is delayed till now. And during that time, of course, the price of housing has gone up by some estimates 25-30% in our region. So our concerns that we had in 2019, or if anything, have gotten greater now. And here we are. And I think one of the reasons that we're also doing this is because the state of Connecticut requires each town to have an affordable housing plan. And it's my hope tonight to have a positive discussion that may go beyond what the state requirements are to meet Cornwall's needs in a very thorough way. Specifically tonight, I hope to hear discussion about the town's affordable housing planning process, the need for housing options in town, the ever increasing need for housing in town, a variety of housing, ways to support the Cornwall Housing Corporation's effort, and also some new ways to finance home ownership in town. We have a good variety of speakers who I thank, and each will talk for about 3 to 5 minutes each. And that should take about an hour, and then we will have a time for public comments, and then we'll follow that for people that are really interested. There's been a film recently produced by Ted Perotti from North Canaan, and it highlights some of the issues and efforts that people are making in Northwestern Connecticut to address affordable housing. So again, I think it's important to realize that that this is also a statewide issue. And in fact, Maria Horn may join us tonight if she's able, depending on what's going on in Hartford, because there was significant legislation passed last week in the House of Representatives, still has to go to the Senate about housing. And so again, it's been a statewide issue, as Connecticut was 45th in population growth out of the 50 states in the last 10 years. And in fact, we know in the town of Cornwall, we saw until last year a negative population decline. And that's sort of what's going on in the state of Connecticut. The 46 and under group actually lost population for states. So it is a statewide issue, and the state is trying to address it. And some of these trends that we're seeing playing out here as far as cost, availability, issues of multifamily housing are also being discussed and considered throughout the country. So anyway, I would now like to start by asking my fellow selectmen to give you their welcome and perspective, starting with Priscilla.
Thank you, Gordon. It's always a pleasure to be in a Cornwall meeting. I came here as a weekender in 1975 and moved up in 92 full-time. So I have seen a lot of growth and a lot of shrinkage. Recently, in getting ready to give a presentation to the graduating 8th graders from Cornwall Consolidated, when I checked on the population earlier in the season, there were 8. When I called back to get the names, there were now 12. We have 12 youngsters graduating from the 8th grade in June. We need more young people, but we don't have, as many of you know, I'm also in real estate, and I can tell you that we are suffering when it comes to finding affordable housing. Now, I'm not talking about new things, I'm talking about what exists. So I'm looking forward to tonight's meeting, and I welcome all of you.
Thank you, Priscilla. So Marina, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm not at my computer. I'm trying to make everything happen. I just want to thank everyone that's been working on this issue. There are a lot of really talented people that are spending a lot of their time researching and really thoughtfully attacking the issue of affordable housing. So I just want to say thank you. And I would like to just echo, Gordon, what you said. I won't repeat it, but I do 100% agree. And I would like to add that as we move forward on this issue, I think we need to start looking at affordable housing in sort of a larger sense. Like, I feel like looking at it through the lens of affordable housing is quite a narrow scope. For example, I'm 35. The only reason why I was able to come to Cornwall 5 years ago is because we have family property. And I feel like a lot of my contemporaries that came back to Cornwall came back because of that as well. And
Marina, you suddenly muted yourself.
sorry, where did I leave off?
There you go. At contemporaries who returned to Cornwall.
Okay, yeah, so my contemporaries and I were lucky to come back because we had a stepping stone, which was largely family properties or houses. But that's really not sustainable for our generation. And I know as I tend to look for housing, and my contemporaries do, there's really nothing for us to purchase or rent. And we are not of the economic background that requires subsidized housing. So I think we really need to approach the housing issue mainly looking for diverse housing options that can bring young people that might be essential workers or volunteers, but also middle-class professionals that want to live in Cornwall. And both of those demographics are, of child rearing age. And so I urge people to have an open mind when they discuss this topic.
Great. Well, thank you, Marina. And getting a little echo there. So
Yeah.
So next, I'd like to have Janelle Mellon, who's our planning consultant, who the town hired to help us work on our plan, give us an overview of the plan. She's been working hard trying to pull together a lot of information on what's going on and where we're going. So Janelle.
Great.
Thank you.
And Jonathan, thank you for sharing the slides that I prepared on behalf of the Cornwall Affordable Housing Working Group. Next slide. So, just so everyone can see up on the screen, this is the agenda for this evening. There are many speakers that I'm looking forward to hearing from, and I just want to say thank you all for tuning in, and thank you to the steering committee for your important work. Next slide. So just in brief, why is there an affordable housing committee in Cornwall, and what exactly are they doing? So the Cornwall Affordable Housing Committee is a group of residents who are ensuring that the town satisfy a new state mandate, which is to develop an affordable housing plan. The state back in 2017 mandated that every municipality under 830J prepare a plan that indicates and specifies how the plan intends to increase the number of affordable housing options, both for current and also future residents. This town is intended to be on a 5-year cycle. So unlike the plan of conservation development, which is on a 10-year cycle, it needs to be updated 5 years. Next slide. Great. So just in brief, I know different terms get thrown around. The state, as far as affordable housing go, defines affordable housing as housing that costs less than 30% of the income of a household earning 80% or less of the area median income. So that in our instance would be Litchfield County. And that gets adjusted annually and also by household size. So based upon the definition of the state updates a list every year. That's called the State's Affordable Housing Appeals List, which also ensures that affordability remains in place. And just currently in Cornwall, 36 affordable units qualify by that definition that's up on the screen, and also by that affordability requirement that the affordability remains in place. So that's currently 3% of Cornwall's housing, which is approximately 1,000 units. 10 of those are at Bonnybrook, 18 at Cougaman, 2 are tenant rental assistance, and the remaining affordable units are scattered sites. Next slide. So the purpose of the plan and what we've had discussions about as a committee is not only to focus on the state's term of affordable housing. It's very important to acknowledge and understand what qualifies in the state as affordable, because it is a requirement that we do strategize how to increase the number of affordable units per that state definition. But it's also a time for the town to really focus on the state's to focus rather comprehensively and proactively plan for future and current residential needs and think through housing and planning for housing in the future. Back in December of 2020, the state put out guidelines. And again, they're just guidelines of how we could tackle the requirement to adopt a plan. And some of the elements include housing need assessment, housing creation goals, plan strategies, and measures of success. I do know in communication with the steering committee thus far, we've gotten to the point where we've looked at a lot of the data, a lot of assessment, so that we can reach data-driven goals and strategies. So the planning process began in February of this year. The steering committee has met every month, and we're at the stage where we're communicating the process to the greater community, and we'll do that periodically as we continue to embark on this process. And just final note on this slide, that is all grant funded by Department of Housing. Next slide. So this is just a visual overview of our timeline. So here we are, May 2021 at the Housing Forum. This summer, we'll spend the bulk of the work really developing the strategies, developing the plan. That's the bulk of the work that I'll be doing, and then bringing it back out to the public, finalizing and getting it before eventually Board of Selectmen adoption. Hopefully that will all occur before the snow flies. What we have done thus far, as mentioned, is really dig deep into the data and begin to look at what our housing goals might be, building upon what's been written in the Plan of Conservation and Development, which we'll hear about later. Next slide. So just in brief, some of the discussion thus far has been around these data points specific to the town of Cornwall. An initial goal that has come out of looking at that data is the statement here: we want our children to be able to live in Cornwall. Just a brief overview of a bunch of the data that we've dissected and looked at and that are utilizing for the purposes of making data-driven decisions and coming up with strategies around this data. Connecticut actually has the second highest percentage of young people aged 19 to 34 living with their parents. Litchfield County, we're actually at 46%. Another thing Gordon touched upon earlier this evening, the housing prices in Cornwall. Housing is very expensive. The average price based on some real estate data that we came across, MLS data in 2020, said that housing on average costs $620,000 per housing unit. And that's a 22% increase from the year prior. Housing growth is also slow in the state. Housing permit data from the town showed in summary that an average of about 1 to 2 housing units is produced per year. And the state does a lot of data mining through the Partnership for Strong Community. They came out with the figure that in approximately the last 40 years, that change of building permits, so new houses, is down negative 92%. Next slide. And to another point, I believe Gordon made in his introduction is about the aging population. The next goal that the Housing Committee has been discussing is the statement: we want our seniors to be able to downsize or age in place. Connecticut's Legislative Committee on Housing reported that by 2025, Cornwall is predicted to have a higher percentage of seniors than in any other town in the state. The population, and this potentially might have been a little bit changed due to COVID, but based on census data, the population is currently around 13,000, and by 2040, it's predicted to be less than 1,000. I just want to note, we'll discuss Bonnie Brook in detail later this evening. That is the only age designated housing available in Cornwall. There are 10 units there. The current wait list is made up of 10 individuals, and an average wait for each individual is 2 years. Next slide. Following statement: we don't want our neighbors in Cornwall to be housing cost burden. Housing cost burden means a household spends more than 30%. That's kind of the golden rule for what one should spend on housing. That includes rental, mortgage, payments, utilities, and maintenance. In Cornwall, currently 35% of the population is housing cost burden. This graph on the slide shows that that's broken up amongst renters and homeowners. And I think it's important to note and just consider Connecticut is the 3rd most costly state in terms of home maintenance. So not only does the upfront cost of housing sometimes get in the way, the cost of maintenance is estimated at greater than $17,000 per year in Connecticut. Next slide. And just final value statement, goal statement that the steering committee has been in discussion about is this statement: we want a diversity of housing types in Cornwall to meet the needs of a diverse population. A rich diversity of housing types is key to community vitality, economic mobility, and economic growth. These graphics just show the housing type in Cornwall is very prevalently single family dwellings detached on a single family lot. And with that, I just want to say these data points were the source of all those housing goals that I quickly talked through. And the group is focusing now just on how to strategize around these goals as it carries its work forward. With that, I would like to turn the discussion over to Anna Tamel, who's the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as a volunteer on the Affordable Housing Committee. Oh, I think you're muted, Anna.
Of course, everybody does this. Thank you, Janelle. Jonathan, could you move on to the next slide in that presentation? So most of you probably know that we, Cornwall, voted in a new plan of conservation and development in November of 2019, becoming effective January of 2020. A large number of people, volunteers as well as members of planning and zoning, worked very hard for a long time to develop the goals and strategies of that plan. I want to recognize the subcommittee on housing particularly. This was led by our former chair of planning and zoning, Jill Cutler, and the following town volunteers were on that committee: George Wolf, Joanne Wojtacek, Lisa Simont, Jackie Schiller, and Ginny Block. And I think some of you are here this evening. I know you put in many, many months, having many, many meetings, and in the end, came up with the goals that people can see on the screen on the left. Increase the number of affordable housing units by at least 25. Increase the number of attainable rental housing units. Many people have been trying to find a language that we can speak about distinguishing affordable housing from housing that's appropriate for people who earn too much to qualify for affordable housing, but not enough to buy any homes in Cornwall. And we, at the time, fell on the word attainable. Third goal, consider zoning and permitting changes that would make building homes more affordable. Fourth goal, increase first-time homebuyer options. And the last, make the housing stock more energy efficient and accessible. Now, the subcommittee came up with a number of strategies. The vast majority of them fall into the category of changes in our zoning regulations. There were 10. I am not going to read them all. Some of them we have already accomplished. I'm very pleased to say that one of the strategies was to amend our regulations so that homeowners could have a free second cut as long as they created an affordable lot. This means, and we did after several public hearings, vote that regulatory change into place. People who want to subdivide their property and to create a lot to donate to the Cornwall Housing Corporation no longer have to go through our subdivision special permitting process. Or rather, they have to have a special permit, but they do not have to follow the fairly detailed and lengthy requirements of the subdivision regulations. So we have had a start. And one of the other strategies I wanted to mention, because it's in the news right now, is increased flexibility of accessory housing or accessory apartment regulations. Because this is the statute that Gordon was talking about that is working its way through the legislature now. it would allow accessory apartments by right as opposed to special permit. These are just examples. We'll certainly be bringing the 10 strategies before the steering committee for the affordable housing subcommittee. And I also want to emphasize that P&Z is very interested in hearing any of the creative ideas that Cornwall residents might have for other ways than the ones we've thought about to help people who can't afford to live here come to this town and enjoy it, work in it, contribute to it, and send their children to our school. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Anna. And next is Maggie Cooley, President of the Cornwall Housing Corporation.
Hi. So I think I'm supposed to talk for 3 minutes. It's going to be hard. Can you hear me? Because I can't see me, so I'm assuming it works. Okay. The first impulses for affordable housing in Cornwall came in 1986 when Patsy Van Doren was first selectman and Gordon and Steve Hedden were her cohorts. And she started a study group to think about affordable housing, which resulted in the 1988 incorporation of what is the Cornwall Housing Corporation. Already before we were incorporated, the study group had gone to planning and zoning with a lot of fabulous ideas for zoning changes, which would be housing friendly. And they are the bedrock of what's in the regulations now. And we were one of the very first towns in the region to have such regulations, and meant that we were called on to work with other towns a lot as they got affordable housing off the ground. Then what happened? Then 1990, the town had been given land or given money by Bill and Lois Kugelman, and decided to use it to buy the land that Kugelman Village now sits on. And that was built with a gigantic mortgage from Connecticut Housing Finance Administration, close to paid off. And that has 18 units of housing, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom that qualify, as you've seen, with the state for capital A affordable housing. Those rents, there's a raise in rents just about to happen, and those rents at that point will be $522, $536, and $570, I believe, $556 maybe, and $570. So they're really low rents by comparison with other towns. And at the same time, the parcel program was invented, which is a home ownership program, which qualifies more as what we've decided to call attainable housing, because you are allowed to have a higher income than the 80% of county median, which is the ceiling for Kugelman. And that is also due to generosity of Cornwall people, either people who gave money or people who gave land or houses. Ann Hubbard, Polly Calhoun, Ted Dodd, under market sales by the Foote family for the houses on Pierce Lane, Ella Clark, and just recently, Ginny Potter have been the backbone of that program. And anybody who cares to carve off an acre or two for that program will be high on our list of perfect people. What else? I don't think I have to talk about the zoning changes that were made specifically, maybe if we have more questions. There are lots of ways in which things could change and get better, but I'm going to stop talking and pass on to whomever the next person is, maybe Will.
Yeah, so thank you, Mag. And just one clarification, I was not on the board with Patsy when this started. I was on the Planning and Zoning Commission when she sat in on planning and zoning meeting and said, we're not going home until we do something about housing in this town. And anybody that remember Patsy Van Doren, she got things done, no doubt about it. So anyway, good story. But thank you. And Will is Will here tonight to give us an update on Bonnybrook housing in Cornwall Bridge. William here?
No.
Well, I'll talk about that if in Will's absence, if you like, just a quickie.
There's one call-in user. Is that Will? You'd have to unmute yourself. Okay, I don't think it is then.
Well, I'll tell a little bit about Bonnybrook, which was an initiative of the Cornwall Housing Corporation that after Cougarman and the parcel program were rolling, we wanted desperately to do something about senior housing. And we formed another corporation with a lot of overlap of board membership, at least for the first 5 years. Now there's no overlap except for Will. And the first president was Cheryl Evans, who led us to the construction, the long process of getting the grant from HUD and the construction of Bonnybrook, with Will acting pretty much as clerk of the works for that process. And that was made possible, both the purchase of the land and adding extras all along from the generosity of a lot of other people in Cornwall who probably don't want their names mentioned right now, but anyway, thank you. And that's that we bought the land in 2007. I think Bonnybrook opened maybe 2009 and it's been full ever since. That's it for now.
Yeah, Mag, I'd just like to say a little anecdote. I did talk to a former Cornwall resident who is moving back to town and going to be living in Cougarman Village, and she's just delighted to be able to return to Cornwall and wouldn't be able to do so if it wasn't for the efforts of people like you and many people to make sure we have some places for people that need affordable rents. So anyway, the process is still going on and people are very grateful. Next, we have Heather. I think Heather is here, and Heather is our wonderful social service agent who has a weekly interaction with people that maybe are having issues with staying in Cornwall, and housing tends to pop up as a big one. So I think she has a particularly unique perspective on a lot of times rural poverty is hidden in some ways, and Heather does a great job interacting with people to get them assistance in a variety of different ways. So Heather, if you're here, please tell us what's going on.
Sure. So I primarily work with small families and Cornwall residents. And I think, like everything, we look at things now with what happened before COVID and what happened after. But I will say from my perspective, things have grown in terms of my caseload, but the trends have really remained the same. They're just bigger. So I would group my clients and caseload into 3 groups, seniors being one. And a lot of my work with seniors is connecting them with services, including helping to keep them in their homes and being able to age in place. So that's not just financial assistance, but it's also community services that help them stay in our community. The second group would be families, again, connecting them with resources in the community, helping to pay bills, including rent and mortgage. And in 2020, there was about $25,000 spent from the Food and Fuel Fund to help support Cornwall households with rent and mortgage payments. That was about 25% of the overall expenses from the Food and Fuel Fund, and that percentage tracks year over year, although the dollar amount was significantly higher in 2020 due to COVID. And then the final group of people that I would categorize my caseload to be would be, I would say, 4 to 6 clients who are mostly men who are very, very low income, do not qualify for most federal and state programs, and are in living arrangements where they're not paying rent, but they're very precarious arrangements at this point. So it's a lot of connecting with services, and their housing is definitely touch and go, I would say, and constantly wondering and worrying that, you know, they might not be able to stay in Cornwall. So those are sort of the 3 groups of clients that I'm working with. And as I mentioned before, we have spent about $25,000 in 2020 just from the Food and Fuel Fund to support with housing expenses. That's the second largest expense behind the food pantry. But there are other area funds that help support with housing. That primary one that I access is the Neighbor to Neighbor Fund, which is managed through the Northwest COG. It's a fund of Berkshire Taconics, and they've been incredibly generous to all towns in Northwest Connecticut, but Cornwall has really accessed a lot of money, especially during COVID, in support of a number of things, including rent and mortgage payments. The Jane Lloyd Fund, which is also a fund of Berkshire Taconic, which supports patients who are going through cancer treatment, and I have used that for 3 Cornwall residents in the past year, and that can help support with any number of bills. But I do use it for rent payments, because rent payments in Cornwall are quite high, so it's often difficult to get, you know, local support for even a month's worth of rent. And then the local fund through the Cornwall Housing Association is the Clifton Reed Fund, which I've also accessed in the past. As we look ahead, I'm concerned about the eviction moratorium ending and what that's going to look like as landlords and property owners perhaps try to collect back rent, and how that's going to impact Cornwall families. I've also had a couple of clients recently who were living in houses in Cornwall in small apartments or even in rooms and helping out, and then the house got sold and the person was with nowhere to live. So those clients have now been, you know, moved to Torrington, where they started out in the homeless shelter, unfortunately. And I also hear from people who grew up in Cornwall or grew up in the area who'd like to move back, but aren't able, first of all, to find an affordable apartment or house. And if they were able to, they don't have adequate credit to access a mortgage or oftentimes even a rent. So helping them to find credit repair programs and help them to connect back with the community where they do have a connection, and get that support to build their credit in order to qualify is another area that I'm seeing more and more of, especially from younger past residents of Cornwall in the area. And that's it.
Great. I know a lot of these speakers could speak longer. And again, Heather's job is huge. It has been a primary function of the town of Cornwall since it was founded to keep to look after its residents, and perhaps that is getting to be more and more a function of the town. I know the work and the effort in that regard has greatly increased in the last 10 years. So again, we're very fortunate to have Heather have a wonderful way of knowing what needs to be done in that regard. Next, we have Melanie King, and I'd like to thank our mutual friend, Sana Peterson, who said that Melanie would like to speak tonight. And anyway, she has a great Cornwall story, which I think illustrates what we're talking about. So Melanie, welcome. Thanks for volunteering.
Hi, I'm Melanie. For those of you who don't know me, Melanie King. My maiden name is Riley. So you guys might be more familiar with Melanie Riley. My mom is Maura. My sister is Kaylin. We moved to this area when I was about 8 years old. We lived in the legendary Pink House in West Cornwall and rented there. And then moved up to a wonderful rental up in Yelping Hill. And then two incomes became one, and we couldn't afford renting in Cornwall anymore. And when we first moved to Cornwall, my mom just fell in love, and our family fell in love with the area, and this was it. This was our home. We wanted to stay here. And so when that happened, we were like, oh no, what do we do? My mom didn't want to take us out of Cornwall. My little sister still had a lot of time left at CCS. I enjoyed my time at CCS, and it just was not what we wanted to do. And so we thankfully had Cougarman Village. My mom put us on the wait list, and we had really wonderful people who vouched for my mom and supported us getting into Cougarman Village, which was really amazing. And it became home, and we were really, really thankful for it. And I was actually talking to a friend of mine recently, just today, about how if I hadn't stayed in Cornwall, and if my family hadn't stayed in Cornwall and we had to find places elsewhere, what would have happened? Where would I be now? Because I ended up meeting someone local and getting married, and Cougarman just ended up being so important to all of us. And so then I got to go to college, so on and so forth. And then my husband and I were starting to look for a home, and didn't think it would be possible, but somehow magically it all kind of fell into place for us. And during a pandemic, no less, we weren't really rushing to find a home, but I found out I was pregnant, and it just became something that needed to happen. And so we somehow magically found a home here in Cornwall. So we're back here, and I'm back in my hometown, and I cannot tell you how thankful I am to be here, to be able to raise my family here and live with this supportive community. And yeah, so I have connections to affordable housing. I have connections to the really supportive community. And now as a homeowner, knowing how difficult it was for us, and also knowing how difficult it is for my friends that are my age, where my husband and I are young, we're in our 30s, early 30s, and we are the only ones who are even close to being ready to buying a home, as far as I know, and it just seems so unattainable. And so again, just really lucky, and I know how hard it has been for young people to find a place here, not just buying a home, but renting. So I'm really happy to be here, listening to all of you wonderful people working really hard to make it attainable. That's it.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Melanie. And from what I understand, you're teaching, and your husband has a landscape business. So busy. Yeah, and kids on the way, which is always great to hear. So a little population explosion going on in town, which is great. Yeah, so great. So then also Patricia Vanicky, my friend, called me up and said, I hear you're having a housing forum. I would like to give you a perspective of what it's like being able to live in Cornwall. So I think, again, it's important to hear different voices and get away from the policy and sort of humanize the story, because these are, I think, really important part of it. So Patricia, are you there?
Okay, thank you. Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Patricia Vanicky, and I have been a Cornwall resident for a decade now. Wow. I want to thank you all for this opportunity to speak this evening here at the Housing Forum. I think that is important that we are having a productive conversation as Cornwall has residents, has to where and how we would like to see our community developing. That we are thinking about the values and vision for Cornwall. I think it's crucial for us to design and to build our community with a smart zoning reform where we can begin to forge an equal, prosperous, and sustainable community. When I think about a house, I ask myself 3 questions. How does a house help someone to achieve their goals? What opportunities open up for a family if they are established in a supportive community? What does it mean to live in a safe, stable, and affordable home? Before answering these questions, I would like to share my own experience of living and working in Cornwall for the last 10 years. I have learned that Cornwall may be a utopia for some, but not for all. By now, you have noticed my strong accent. I'm from Brazil and I speak Portuguese and Spanish. My Cornwall experience have been quite varied right now. I must tell you that sadly, I have been discriminated against here. But on the other hand, I receive extraordinary support from my fellow Cornwall residents. And I can see many in this video right now. In this community, I have flourished. I have worked as house cleaner, nurse aide, postal officer work, and now I'm a current member of the Regional 1 High School. My expertise is art. My background is unusual. In Brazil, I was employed as an art teacher, and then I became a federal police officer. I was a federal police officer for 11 years, and I have many stories to tell you, but I'm not gonna share them right now as I'm saving those for my autobiography, and you have to buy the book. Many of you know my husband, James Vanicki. He has been working Cornwall for 38 years. James and I are able to build a house here. Thank you for a generous gift. A house is just a piece of heaven to us. A home where we feel safe and secure. And according to the Federal Housing Department, like Janelle told us, you know, affordable housing is a household that can obtain for 30% or less of their income. We are just about able to pay in their range. But now I would like to return to the question I first posed. How does a house help someone to achieve their goals? What opportunities open for a family if they are established in a supportive community? What does it mean to live in a safe, stable, and affordable home? I think we agree a house is more than a roof over our head. It's a building block of stability. A home provides a myriad of opportunity. So will the town of Cornwall provide those opportunities for those who find themselves unable to make that 30% income level? I may ask you to say yes. I may ask you to provide those myriads of opportunity to enhance the community, to help our fellow human being to flourish. Let's look at the other side of the coin. Is a one-way transaction? Does Cornwall give and receive nothing in return? Will the town benefit from affordable housing? the answer is a resounding yes. The town will benefit. And the towns of the northwest corner are suffering right now with aged population, brain drain of our youth, ever increasing housing expense, and a little opportunity for employment for the middle class. By providing housing opportunities, Cornwall will benefit from fresh blood and young working class families. I can also tell you from first-hand experience, our local public high school is gradually decreasing population. We need students. Housatonic once have nearly 800 students, and nowadays the number is 318. And according to 2020 housing data profiles, our wage need to afford a 2-bedroom apartment here is $22.69 dollars. Okay. Cornwall project population range from 2020 to 2004 is declined to 29%. So 35% of our fellow residents are cost burning on housing. I mean, I'm talking about your neighbor. 30%, 35% of our neighbors are struggle to pay the rent right now. Cornwall has more households with someone older than 60 and few households with school-age children. Our community is struggling with volunteers in the fire department, ambulance, that right now provide free ambulance service. And you know, our community need people to work and to live here. We need to make our community more vibrant. And I'm sure if we have a large population, that will help our town. And maybe, you know, you can even meet someone with a charming accent like mine.
Okay, thank you very much, Patricia. I appreciate your words, your perspective, your
Eloquence.
your eloquence, and yeah, I wish I was going to Uzi and taking art. Maybe I'd be a better artist today. So anyway, thanks for all you do. So next we have Beth O'Donnell, whose family have strong roots in the Cornwall soil, and she works full-time developing affordable housing in Boston. So she has been monitoring our committee's work and has some things to tell us about her experience from outside Greater Cornwall. Beth.
Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, everyone who worked hard to put this forum together, and thank you for inviting me. It's really nice to listen and hear people's stories, and I hope I can share something that is thought-provoking. Yes, I will start with a disclosure. I work in Boston. I'm from the Northwest corner. I work in Boston, so this is one person's perspective. I called this income restricted housing. I had the same desire to get away from the word affordable housing, to broaden it. I love attainable housing. So if I hadn't already sent this presentation off, I might have changed the name. Next slide, please, Jonathan. Okay, what it is not. Let's start there from my perspective. Income restricted housing is not easy to build. I can attest to that, and so can everyone else who's worked on it in Cornwall and other towns. There are many, many steps. There's community process permitting. You have to assemble the funding. There's risk associated with it, including construction risk. And then there's operating risk once you put it into service. It's definitely not easy. It takes dedication and persistence. It's also not cheap. And I mean that in two different ways. It's not inexpensive. It requires resources to secure a site and build affordable housing, to finance it and construct it. But I also mean cheap in terms of quality. Affordable housing, income restricted housing is often owned for decades by the same owner. And so decisions are made along the way accordingly, and very durable materials should be chosen and high quality construction should be used. Next slide, please. What it is. So it's this is a broad category, which many of these types of housing were mentioned today, but it includes home ownership and rental opportunities. It includes mixes of income from very low, extremely low income, to close to market rate. Can be senior or family focused. It always provides equitable access to high quality, stable housing opportunities, which goes to what Pat was just speaking about and how important that is, that it improves the quality of life for residents, reduces stress for cost burden families. And one of the most motivating elements for me is that it lets kids be kids, which is hard when you live in a cost burdened household. Next slide, please. It can be innovative in form or function and sustainable. I'm working on a project right now that is going to be FIAS Passive House certified. It has an enormous solar array on the roof. I also have a LEED certified platinum project, and the city of Boston is pushing for net zero. So there are big opportunities in terms of sustainability in current affordable housing practices. It's a way to build community, and it can include lots of amenities, including community space, playgrounds, vegetable gardens, native landscape plantings, and full accessibility for folks who need that. Next slide, please. Okay, I have some photos that I'd like to share with you to give you an idea of what it can look like. So this is an apartment building that was recently updated. It's income restricted housing. Next slide. Finding sites is hard everywhere. Sometimes you find a site that you already have, and this is in the parking lot of that previous building. Because it's really tough to find sites. So this is kind of a creative shape here. It's squeezed into a former parking lot and right up against a railroad track, but it will house families. Next slide, please. This is a cluster of townhouse style income restricted units. These are just a couple of years old and have up to 4 bedrooms in them. Next slide. Here's another way that income restricted housing can look. This is a beautiful old school building that has gorgeous income restricted units inside of it. Next slide. Here's a brand new building. People haven't even moved into this one yet. This is 12 units. The architect is a friend of mine, and he's very excited about these tangerine doors, which you can see there. Very nice. Next slide. This is home ownership. So these are townhouse style lots that are owned fee simple. They're not condos. Each unit, you see 2 red doors there. Each unit has a front yard and a backyard, and the lot line runs right through the middle of this building. So they're townhouse style home ownership, up to 120% of area median income. The buyers who will qualify for these units. Next. This is a former blacksmith shop that was turned into 4 units of income restricted housing and a community room. This is right next to the green building we saw 2 slides ago. This is probably one of my favorites. Next. And here's a playground right next to an attainable housing complex that is just coming on the market in Boston. I love this playground. This is an example of the kind of amenity you can have associated with this housing that allows kids to be kids. Thank you. I look forward to hearing any questions that folks might have. And I think that the next speaker is Ron Goldstein from National Iron Bank.
Hello. That was a fantastic presentation, by the way. That was very creative and yeah, great work you're doing. So my name is Ron Goldstein. I'm the branch manager at National Iron Bank right here in Cornwall. Cornwall resident myself. My family spent the majority of my childhood was at least with CCS and in Cornwall, and I was given the choice. And I see a lot of people are kind of sharing their personal stories here. I think that's amazing. I was given a choice as to whether or not Cornwall would be a place to come back to or not, and it wasn't a choice to me. This is a fantastic place to live. It's where I want to raise my family personally. And I can't think of any other place I'd want to be. So with that said, I have a proposal that I've been putting together at the bank here, more targeted towards, it seems, maybe these single family units. But essentially what this is, it's a community fund proposal. What this would be, it's more of a style of account type that could be used to take funds that would be allocated towards affordable housing, apply them, well, the town would apply them, and then those funds would be regenerative, meaning that those funds would not go away over time. They would be used for 10, 20, 30 years in the future, and then going on from there. So the key benefits here would be that it would ease the process for new residents coming to Cornwall. With those new residents, we are looking at more tax income for the town. And then there would be more revenue from interest-bearing accounts for the town while these accounts are open, as well as helping build or rebuild credit for these residents, new residents to the town as well, and overall increasing property values. The way this would work, the regenerative account, is that you'd have a main core account, right? So this would be maybe a portion of any funds that would be coming in through a grant. And then this core account would be set aside. It would have its own interest rate, so it would be earning interest for the town. Now, when there's someone that the town has decided they would like to choose as someone who they want to allocate some of these funds towards, whether that be for a down payment, loan closing cost assistance, home repair, if there's any qualifications they have to meet for their insurance, septic, roofing, I mean, the list goes on. These expenses are major barriers to many residents moving to town. And when given the choice and they're in front of a real estate agent or a loan originator and they see these embedded costs into moving to Cornwall, this would be a kind of a tool for those people in those fields to then remove those barriers and allow these people to make moving to Cornwall a much easier choice. So when a person has been come to the town of Cornwall, or a real estate agent would make the referral to the town and say, look, this is a person who may be in need of these kinds of assistance. At that point, from that core account, there would be what we call a CD secured loan created, where a CD would be created, which would earn interest more, once again, for the town. And then that would be used as collateral to be to use to give that new resident funds to take care of whatever issues they may have moving to the town. Over time, that resident would then pay that fund back to that fund, which would thereby create this regenerative process where you're going to see these same funds used over and over again to help people throughout the future. So that that is the proposal here. Regardless of what we do to help better the community here and create some economic diversity, myself as a resident here, and then also as the bank, we're in full support. So whatever we end up doing here, there's a lot of amazing ideas. We're 100% behind it. So thank you so much for your time. And if you have any questions, I'm here.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. This a account like this is in Norfolk, right? They have something they've had for a while up there.
That's correct. Yeah, there's several accounts that do use this process already. It's shown some very good signs of success, and it definitely is one way that once again, when someone's in that decision-making process of whether, which town they're going to move to, if they're deciding between, let's say a town in New York and then they, or Cornwall, this is something where, anywhere along the process, they could say, either the real estate agent, loan originator, bank, town, we could all just say, okay, well, there's this one extra benefit to moving to Cornwall. There's this one extra step, this one extra push to make you come here and live in this town.
Great. Well, thank you. We'll have to look into that. And next is, was Maria Horn able to join us? John, Maria signed in? I know she wasn't sure whether she'd have to have a bunch of votes and things in Hartford as they're in session, but she might have come in. Anyway,
I did not see her, sorry.
In her newsletter this week, they did detail some legislation in housing that was passed, which, as Anna pointed out, did focus on housing. And one of the things was to promote regulatory changes to allow more accessory dwelling units, which again, people that have those, and we do allow those in town, it is a way to get a foothold in town. And there are several ways that the town's P&Z may look to either expand the size of the dwelling units or make the permitting easier, that kind of thing. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of Hartford, but that's one of the things that we as a task force may recommend the town do. So I think that's it for our presentations. Are there any questions I can ask as moderator? And again, if people want to make statements or ask questions, please limit yourself to 3 minutes the best you can. And yeah, so anyway, anyone have a question, comment?
Some comments. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Ridgway, and I'm a third generation Cornwall resident and a 2008 CCS graduate. My unofficial estimates have found that less than 5 students from my class of 20 still live here in town. These students are all involved in family businesses. Interestingly, about 15 sets of parents and 5 sets of grandparents live in town. Yet none of my classmates' children live in town. This is a small sample, but I challenges of young families. Professionally, I'm an emergency department nurse, and living close to work gives me 2 major benefits. Firstly, I know that Cornwall residents feel comforted seeing a familiar face when they're facing an emergency. The other advantage is that it gives me more hours in the day that I wouldn't spend commuting, and I've been able to use those hours to be an active volunteer and officer with the fire department, as well as help Heather out from time to time with the food pantry. I would also like to provide a nursing perspective on housing. The impact of housing on health cannot be underestimated. The Healthy People 2030 is an initiative by the United States Department of Health and Human Services and elaborates that financial difficulties associated with housing is linked with worse mental health, as well as an increased risk of disease. Making housing less of a burden can help improve health and reduce the risk of homelessness. one of the Healthy People 2030 goals is to decrease the proportion of families that spend more than 30% of their income on housing, a goal that has been mentioned earlier in this forum. Ultimately, I feel
Uh-oh.
as well, like Janelle, Beth, and Ron in the steering committee about making housing more accessible, especially to young families and the elderly.
Hey, thank you, Liz. We lost a little bit of that last part, but anyway, we get the message. Thank you, and for all you do. And again, another tribute to our little school. The high percentage of graduates to go into healthcare or helping people, education or whatever, as you're hearing tonight, is remarkable and a testament to that place. So, any other questions, comments, thoughts going forward? Again, we want to make this a public process, and again, a lot of people have contributed their thoughts and ideas going forward. And I think, as Maggie said, that Cornwall has always done a lot in this area, but as the challenges have increased, there's certainly more to do. So any
Gordon, Jenny Block has her hand up.
Jenny, how are you, Jenny?
Oh, Jenny, you're muted. Sorry.
Thank you. Just following the pattern. First of all, thanks to everyone who presented tonight. It was really wonderful to have both personal stories from Melanie and Pat, and to hear what the Affordable Housing Plan Committee has been doing. My question is for Ron about the account that he spoke about. I'm just wondering, where did the initial funds for that account, where would they come from?
Hi there. Thanks for the question. I've had this has been an active discussion as to where these funds might come from. I've had a discussion with Gordon about potentially looking into the generosity of the local Cornwall residents. And that has been a pattern over the history of this town, where we're seeing some of these longtime residents reaching out and making sure that their community is diverse. In addition, if there were any sort of state grants, anything like that, this would be, at least a portion of that could be set aside for this type of account. And I realize I have a bit of dry delivery, so I apologize about that, but I can't help it. It's the banker in me, but it is actually quite an innovative type of account, which is something that you could see someone 50 years from now benefiting from the same funds that are granted today. And that is something that is just astonishing. And it's just exciting to think about.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it's a wonderful idea. I applaud you.
So it would be like a community revolving fund that community members could participate, or if we could find other ways to raise money, we could set up some seed money. And again, we have a long tradition of stealing other towns' good ideas in this town. So if we can find how Norfolk did it successfully, or wherever else it's worked, we would happily use those ideas. Yes. Any other questions?
I'd love to ask a question.
Yes, Caroline.
Thank you so much. I'd like to echo Ginny's comment. Thank you so much for putting this together. It was really great and really informative, and so nice to hear all the different perspectives and Beth's experience building the housing. And I think it's a great thing that we're doing for Cornwall. I'm wondering, I noticed that for the timeline, that the state doesn't require this plan to be submitted until 2022, I think mid 2022, if that's right. And so I'm wondering if we can extend our timeline. I noticed that our timeline is the affordable housing plan is to be completed at, I think, in the fall of 2021. So I was just wondering, with all this great information we're getting, so we can digest it and really put together a plan that works for Cornwall, if we might be able to consider taking that extra time that we do have from the state to complete our affordable housing plan in 2022. so we don't rush this process and really kind of get as much input as we can and really put together a great plan for Cornwall.
Gordon, I can take that.
Sure.
Yeah, so we're in the first cycle of funding through the State Department of Housing. We've actually received an extension due to COVID, so our funding cycle runs out in December. That's dictating our schedule.
So, yeah, and I think, and again, we're not going to rush things, but we also do have the benefit of some of the ideas already being put forth in the town plan, and such things as trying to get 25 more units in town in the next 10 years. That's an ambitious number. So again, getting our plan, which can be worked on and adjusted, organized and put in place, I think would be a good thing. But again, we'll be looking for good ideas, which we already have quite a good list already. Any other questions? All right, so I would like to thank you all for participating. There is a very good film coming up for those who want to stay and watch it. It was produced locally. You will see some Cornwall people starring in it even, and it does give you an idea also of some of the successes and also the variation of what different towns and housing groups have done in the area. And I think it's really, impressive, and again shows the dedication of many community people of making their town a better place, and gives us some ideas of going forward. Because again, the thinking is changed in some ways with mixing market rate housing with affordable housing is a relatively new concept that will make and hopefully help with some of the fundraising of some of these projects. So unless there's any other questions, and again, people know where to find us generally, so feel free if there's something in the future you want to ask us to contact us. But Jonathan, if you're ready now, if we can show that film, and that will be the end of our meeting.
Could I just ask one quick follow-up question about that funding? Did you see my hand was raised?
Okay, funding, yes.
Yeah, so is that, if Janelle could explain, is that funding, what is that funding that she's referring to? Like a funding for an affordable housing project, or what kind of funding are we going to run out of by the end of 2020? I thought everyone was kind of a volunteer on the committee, so I was just wondering what funding we're running out of.
The town did apply for and got a grant, as did I think 9 other towns in the COG got grants to get the technical help that Janelle has given us to focus us on the plan and take our ideas forward and to actually get this plan done. So that grant, which pays for Janelle's services, is through the state. So that goes to the town, and then the town uses it to pay for her time and services. It does not itself build a project, it just gets the plan done.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so anyway, thank you again all for coming, and again, in your help, your ideas, and let's see the film.
If you hit, Jonathan, just down on the bottom for share
yes.
screen, yeah, it should work.
To live here, it's too expensive. And we're not.
A study of all the towns in their region. In Washington, there's over 1,000 people who commute here to work.
People are moving away because really it doesn't make sense to live here. It's too expensive. And we're not going to change food prices. We're not going to change the gasoline prices. We can very reasonably provide lower cost housing.
It's been clear over the past 10 years that there's a much greater need for rental housing than we supposed.
I think the average age is something like 60, and we need to attract young families or the town will die.
The state projections are, in 20 years, by 2040, the population is going to diminish by about 22% to 2,400 people. And the population right now is about 3,500.
People need to understand that in order to have a vibrant community, one needs to have a good variety of economic incomes in it. And we need to take care of the nurses and healthcare workers, et cetera.
The affordable rental housing is really the entry point for a lot of these young families. But it's also a place where kids who grew up here can come back and establish themselves. The fact is that the people who move here are doing the work that otherwise they might have to drive an hour to get here. And that's essential for the town. So it benefits the town and it benefits...
Yeah, and they're paying
Yeah.
rent. They pay it not more than a third of their income, but that's the way you can live nowadays. You can't pay more than a third of your income.
Where are we going? I mean, because this is essentially becoming, not literally, but figuratively, it is a gated community. You're going to, the population here is going to drop, as I said. The strain that's going to put on local government, as they're having difficulty finding volunteers now for the fire department, EMTs.
When I was looking out, I was watching people walk out to talk, go back to their homes, check their mailboxes. They tend to look out for each other. Kent Affordable Housing built this, South Common. It opened in 2003 with 24 units. We have a range of people from a newborn who was arrived just after the family arrived to live here, up to elderly, and they work all over town. Some of them are retired. The 4 acres here, they belong to the town. It's not on the road. The entry road was built. It wasn't doing anything but sitting here.
People who've lived here at Cougaman have moved on to the parcel program, been able to move into homeownership. Some have moved to Bonnybrook as they got older and needed a 1-story house. We've had a couple of high school valedictorians here. We've had members of the fire department. We've had people who work in the service trades. There are people who work as school staff. About as random as any other slice of Cornwall.
The new unit in the back has 2 two-bedroom and 2 3-bedroom units. Included in the folks who live there are some essential workers. There's teachers, there's a school bus driver, there are folks who work in retail, there's someone who works at Le Bon's, there's someone who works at one of the restaurants. We are really filling a need, I think, very much in the community. And many of those people would have to live, 45 an hour away?
At our town center rentals, we have people that are in the 20% of AMI, the 50% bracket, the 80% bracket, and then we have some unrestricted units. Department of Housing feels it's really important to have a variety of different income levels. The types of people that are in our rental units are everybody from teachers to some landscapers to a chef. Generally speaking, they're very much members of the community and have been members of the community for a long time, and they just need a little bit of assistance.
The moment I found out that I was going to be able to get the apartment at 4 Shepherd Road, it's a 1-level apartment. I really needed to be able to get into a space where I didn't have to do stairs, and it was much easier for me to move. I had a lot of back issues. I really don't have the words to express how much they have helped me and how much I appreciate it. They were really able to work with me as far as how much I was making and what I could pay, and they were able to get my son and I into one of the apartments.
The 2 houses here, brand new. The farmhouse, we totally renovated. Everything in it is new. Windows, roof, all new mechanicals. The way we set this up is we own the land underneath this, and then we do a 99-year lease. We are responsible for, when the properties are resold, to see that they are resold to people meeting those same area median income levels. The ideal thing would be to find other houses like this that we could take the land and subdivide, but right now, the cheapest house in Washington is about $549,000. Typically, there's around 70 to 80 houses on the market. Right now, there's 24.
Where we are right now was built in the 1980s. It was very controversial. There were stinging letters written to the paper. It was not at all certain that people would be happy with it. In time, and it didn't take very long, it was understood to be essential and respected and enjoyed. Our small towns are not asked to pay for construction or operation of affordable housing. Therefore, property taxes in our towns do not increase by adding these types of housing opportunities. Construction funding comes primarily through the Connecticut Department of Housing, and we're very grateful for their essential partnership in creating new affordable housing options here. Our property managers also carefully vet all applicants who wish to live here, including income and background checks. Most applicants have close ties to the town already. They're moving to be closer to work or family. The professional property managers we hire to manage day-to-day operations, like Tammy here at Sarum Village, are terrific.
And the other thing that I think is very important as a grandmother is that we've also brought some children to school.
There are solar panels at Stewart Farm on 8 of the 13 units. The first summer, their electric bills were $9.12 a month because the sun was out beautifully. I've given you all the upsides. The downside is there's not enough because it takes 5 years to build a complex like this.
The good part is there are good people like Jocelyn and Maggie Cooley, who I work with up in Cornwall, and lots of other people, the Bacharachs over in Kent. There are just lots of dedicated people that, put not just their financial resources, but, their time, which is more precious than anything, into, meeting these needs.
The Cornwall Housing Corporation has benefited from the generosity of people in town, from the Cougamans who gave the money that permitted the purchase of this lot 10 years ago when we had to suddenly come up with the money to buy the lot on which Bonnybrook stands. People were hugely supportive.
We received a donation of another 4-acre parcel here in town, so we're hoping to move forward on another project fairly soon. Abraham Lincoln said, "Public sentiment is everything." With it, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. And so the public sentiment has got to be accepting, here's the vision, after we've had town forums and discussions, all of you have had input, that we've got to implement, this plan that we've come up with to try and reach the goals that we set.
If you want to be able to go out to eat and have somebody wait your table, that person needs a place to live.
The way that affordable housing benefits a town like Salisbury is that it brings fresh life into the town.
I hope that the video will show people sort of the banality of affordable housing in our towns.
It's a real benefit to the town, but to the whole region. And every town needs it.
It's not charity, it's an investment. That's my top headline line.
Negative voices are usually louder than positive ones. If your town is currently creating an affordable housing plan, they need your participation now.
Okay, well, how about that? That's a great film. And again, let you know what has been done, what can be done. And anyway, it all starts with meetings like this and people volunteering. And I did hear from one of my fellow first selectmen who said their town was going through this whole process and they wish they had had the success over time that we have had here in Cornwall. So again, it's time for another round of success. And thank you all for taking the time to check in, and thank for the presenters who volunteered their time and their stories to make this real. Okay, so thank you. And thank you, John, for your technical stuff, Janelle for your help keeping us focused, and everybody else. All right, so good night, folks.